Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the conference room for the ninth session about new payments infrastructures. This session is jointly organized by the Policy Center for the New South, the Reinventing Bretton Woods Committee, and Visa. Our session is also live streamed for the esteemed audience of 2,500 people following our event online. Please welcome to the stage the moderator for this session, Andrew Torre, Regional President for Central Europe, Middle East and Africa at Visa. And the speakers for this session, Mamu Mihretu, Governor at the National Bank of Ethiopia, Roger Madrigal Lopez, Governor of the Central Bank of Costa Rica, Andreas Dombred, Global Senior Advisor at Oliver Wyman, and Marwan Abbasi, Governor of the Central Bank of Tunisia. Andrew Torre, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Very excited to be joined by a distinguished guest of panelists. I also just want to first start off and thank the Reinventing Bretton Woods Committee, Mark. Thank you for hosting this event with us, and also the Policy Center for the New South. We have a pretty broad-ranging discussion today. We want to talk about digital transformation of economies, of digital commerce. You know, payments has really become a very mainstream issue. And as the Bretton Woods institutions have expanded their focus on payments, we all know that. And there's an opportunity today with my distinguished guests and colleagues who are experts on this to have a robust discussion about whether and how the current governance frameworks need to evolve. This week, one of the things we're certainly spending a lot of time and hearing about are digital public infrastructure. Today, if you put a broad definition around digital public infrastructure, although I'm not sure there's really one exists, but I'll posit one, it is a layer of identity systems, of payment infrastructure, and data management and exchange. And as we think about this and think about technology platforms more broadly, we typically think of technology platforms that are successful and add value tend to meet end user needs, that are open and competitive, and have a viable economic model. So with that, let me just quickly ask Andreas to set the stage for us. I will say we are going to go through a round of questions. We also are going to have time at the end for questions from the audience as well. So Andreas, you see a lot around the world. Can you just set the scene for us, what you're seeing in payments, some of the big trends, and also what you're hearing and thinking about digital public infrastructure?
Thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation to this panel. In terms of introduction, I was introduced as a global senior advisor of Oliver Wyman. I should add that from 2010 to 2018, I've been the deputy governor of the German Central Bank. I've been on the supervisory board of the European Central Bank, and I've been on the board of the Bank of International Settlements, which makes me look a little better amongst these three governors. So,
that's exactly why we gave you this question. You wear multiple hats.
So I am between two worlds. Whilst I have a central banking background, I also have a private banking background and understand both sides. While I was in office, I was responsible for bank supervision, I was responsible for financial stability, I was responsible for markets, and I must say I never really tried to be responsible for payments, because at that time, payments was not a very exciting area to be responsible for. It was a sort of more of a boring area. This has changed. I can tell you today, this is a strategic product within central banking and within banks, and has changed fundamentally in its importance and in its significance. And you can see that not only by this group of organizers putting it on the agenda. There's a lot of activity going on in the payments area. Now, we are coming from a cash society. Regardless whether you are lesser developed or more developed countries, cash has been payments have been the lifeblood of any economy, and there is no growth without a proper and efficient payment system. But we're coming from this cash society, and in my home country, a G7 country, Germany, of course, the central bank is organizing the cash, and because this is seen as a public good. So clearly, within payments is a public good, because without payments, you're going to be hampered in growth, you're going to be hampered in many aspects. Now, we are no longer in a cash-abiding society, neither in the more developed countries nor in the lesser developed countries, because there are so many other opportunities how you can execute payments. And there is the trend of doing this as efficiently and as conveniently and as timely and as possible. People want to spend the least amount of money and the least amount of time to transfer money, and they want to, if it's easier to pay with a phone rather than pulling out a credit card, the credit card may well be on the phone, they'll do it with the phone, rather the easiness and efficiency is at the forefront of all payments, regardless in which economy you're talking about. But I would like to come back to the question of what is a public good and what is not a public good. Now, there are some areas within payments where where payments are a network. And if you have networks, you have network effects, and network effects mean that you want to have as many people involved on this network because it becomes more efficient, it becomes cheaper, and it's scalable. And we are seeing this. There are some very few providers, I don't look at anybody particularly, either from the US or from China, who are organizing this. Yeah, and there are some local solutions, but it's mostly on the global side. There are very few providers doing it because there is a network which you need in order, because there's sizable investments needed, and if you need sizable investments, you need to distribute them across a wide range of possible users, as many as possible. Now, having said that, so the public good has to make sure that there are rules, that there exist rules with regard to what is the public good. Rules of who has access, can you deny access, or how can you avoid that people are denied access? How about fees? What would be accessible fees, etc., etc. So you need to have some rules if there is public good. And then you have all the solutions on top, where it becomes, we have much more competition, and you can clearly see that there is how should I say, you have to decide between more monopolistic structures, which are efficient, and competition, which means fragmentation. And you don't want a system where there is no competition. On the other side, you want a system which is efficient and gives good prices to the consumers. And that is where there needs to be a agreement in society and also in the financial services sector. What can you allow? My personal opinion, and I say this as a former central banker, is whatever the private sector can organize reliably and sustainably should be organized by the private sector. The state, the government, should not crowd out the private sector, but there are some certain rules and public goods, if I may say so, and there needs to be a definition of what should be a public good. There needs to be a certain definition of how you organize in terms of access, in terms of fees, etc., how you organize this entire system. So I'm saying this before the discussion of digital currencies, which we may come back to. Clearly, this is something where, as a representative of a European country, I'm seeing a lot, but maybe that's an a second question of yours. Excellent.
Thank you, Andreas. There was a lot there. I'll look to see if any of the colleagues and panelists on the stage. Okay, Governor Madrigal Lopez.
I just want to add one feature. When you talk about public good, and it is something that the private sector can do it, let the private sector do it, that is fine. But it is usually it is a neglected cost that is a coordination cost. So when we are talking about what is the role of the private sector and the public sector, maybe the public sector is for the coordinator, the definition of these rules, to the setup of the system, not for competition with the private sector, but it's very difficult, it's very expensive. Sometimes it let the private sector to organize themselves, to coordinate themselves, because usually, well, that was the case in our country, was not possible. Everyone wanted to take advantage of the power that you have in the market, but it was until the central bank stepped in and set up the rules, what the role of the central bank, set up the rules. So I will say that will be one critical role of the public sector in the payment system, set up the rules, or to be the coordinator, maybe not the maker, but the coordinator of the rest of the system. That's it.
Thank you. Governor Mamo, did you want to say something on this?
I think I want to second what has been said. I think there is a legitimate role to be played by the public sector. I mean, of course, the public sector will not replace the role of the private sector, but there is an important role to be played, as you said, in terms of coordinating, in terms of establishing a sound legal and regulatory regime, in terms of engaging in a sound risk-based supervision, and also in terms of playing a catalytic role in developing the payment system. Of course, the private sector need to provide the needed product and services, but there is a legitimate role for the public sector to play, and that's exactly what we're doing in Ethiopia.
Thank you. I think that seems like there's a fair bit of consensus on the public sector coordinator, setting of rules, shouldn't crowd out the private sector, but should harness and certainly help direct it. Andreas, when you were talking about the scale effects, I was reminded of the mathematical equation around networks, which the value of a network is the square of the number of nodes on the network. And when we think about we talk about ubiquity in payment systems, right? And it is trying to achieve that, to bring as many end users in as possible. Governor Mamo, since you were just talking, if we can switch topics now, Ethiopia is moving very, very fast on a digital transformation agenda. And what role, you're relatively new to the National Bank of Ethiopia, congratulations. What role do you envision for the National Bank in helping drive this digital transformation?
Thank you so much. So I think in Ethiopia, I mean, as Andres said, until recently, payment was not such a defining issue. It was something that was done by, a department nobody pays attention to. But now, payment is everything. The payment infrastructure is everything in Ethiopia. And the growth of, sort of digital payment in Ethiopia, even for us who are, regulating this on a day-to-day basis, is as simply astonishing. And I will offer a few examples why that is the case. But I think just to respond to your question, Andrew, at least in Ethiopia, what we tried to do was try to, help foster the development of digital payment in Ethiopia. And we started by developing a national strategy. So the first thing that we did was we developed a national financial inclusion strategy. We also developed a national digital payment strategy. So those two strategies were guiding strategy, sort of framing strategy that helped us organize better in terms of helping grow that particular sector. I mean, to the point that was raised before, we thought at that time that the public sector has an important role to play in terms of setting the rules of the game, in terms of reducing entry barriers, in terms of fostering innovation, and also in terms of enhancing competition in the sector. So we outlined a clear role for the public sector as we develop the national strategy. In addition to that, we piloted a public-private partnership to accelerate digital transaction, and we created what's called EatSwitch, which is Ethiopia's national switch that has integrated and made all the payment systems interoperable. I mean, here it's a really clear example where, jointly, both public and private sector could work together and achieve a joint objective. In the case of eSwitch, it was owned by the private sector, but the National Bank takes a lead catalytic role. We have minimal share in the system. It's owned by the domestic banking industry, but the National Bank chairs eSwitch, but our ownership interest in the system is quite minimal. But our role is essentially to play a catalytic role, and that we found to be extremely successful. Now, just to my point that, to accelerate the sector, we also decided to take a number of measures immediately. I think the first thing that we did was the sector was not open to foreign direct investment before. So we decided to open up the telecom sector. We also decided to open up the financial service sector. Those two measures had such a dramatic impact in the growth of digital transaction in Ethiopia. When we allowed the telecom operators to engage in digital transaction, the state-owned telecom operator took advantage of that and made a splash in the market. And their contribution was significant. Just to give you some figure, the telecom operator in Ethiopia introduced what they call Telebir, which is a mobile wallet, and the subscriber of that Telebir grew to 37 million subscribers. Last year it was 16 million, but this year it's about 37 million. It's sort of 4x growth in 1 year in one telecom operator. So I think to your question, the network impact, the network effect, the scalability part of it had dramatic impact in terms of enhancing efficiency, payment efficiency, and enhancing financial inclusion. And we found this to be a strategy that is very useful. Just one point to add, we also allowed foreign telecom operators to come and operate in Ethiopia. I mean, the most famous example of successful telecom operator in the African continent is M-Pesa. I don't know if you heard about it. It's a Kenyan operator. We also allowed M-Pesa to come and operate in Ethiopia, and they are competing with Telebir. They are competing with the banks. Again, the government playing a legitimate role in terms of fostering more competition in the market and really trying to prevent a potential monopoly of one operator so that the consumers get the innovation, the reach, the safety that they need. So I think this is the kind of strategy that we're following in Ethiopia, which I'm happy to expand later as well.
Thank you, Governor Mamo. Does anyone have anything to add around the role of the central bank or national bank in digital transformation? Governor Madrigal Lopez, and then Governor Abbasi.
Just a matter of concept. I think that in reality, there is a lot of digitalization already. Sometimes you put, or the people put this cash or digital, but the truth is that many transactions are already digital. So it's little by little being more digitalized, the payment systems. So it's like a natural evolution that we are going through. So there is not this dichotomy that you have a cash economy and digitalized economy. No, we have both. They interact, and little by little, as a matter of the development of in other fields of the society and the economy, that we are every day a little bit more digital. That's it.
Thank you.
I think the role of the central bank in countries like Tunisia is, I think, more difficult than in other countries, even in Africa, because I think what you said about M-Pesa, it was I think specific to Kenya. It was and it was done, I think, when you know very well there's a lot of rural areas and the connectivity was not very important, and having this payment was crucial, just to be able to connect the people to the economy. Countries like us, when we have a banking system quite let's say normal for more than 60 years right now, and we have I think rural area is very well even integrated to the urban areas. I think let's say the pressure on the banking sector or on the central bank to regulate and to give the opportunity for to enhance the what we call the digital payment is not very high. That's why it's quite complicated even for us to do it as a central bank, because at the end of the day they are telling us we are not doing the right task you should do. We talk about what we have done, but what is important today is how we can have a more inclusion in our economies, because the informal sector, and you know very well that the informal sector is very high in Africa, but at the same time, the digital payment is there. In our economy, it's not exactly, but we need to work on that, because I think with the digital payment we can include the let's say the vulnerables, the poor, etc. And that's also is part of normally our job as a central bank.
Thank you. I saw Andreas wants to make an intervention.
Just a very short comment, adding to what the governor said. If payments don't work, this can become a financial stability issue. I would even say it probably becomes very quickly a financial stability issue. So you cannot underestimate the importance of inclusion. I mentioned about my past, and I was a G20 deputy for Germany for a long time. And the first time I remember that inclusion was on the topic of the G20 was in 2011 in Mexico, but not much happened. It's still a lot of private initiative and not a lot of public coordination, coming back to your point, and that is something to be thought about. What can one do in terms of more global initiatives? But each and every country is different. But in one aspect, countries fall together, that if payment systems are not efficient, financial stability may well be at risk very quickly.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And I think what you've heard here through this stream of you want competition. Governor Mamo talked a lot about bringing together a couple of policy objectives. I've been going to Ethiopia for years, and the move to EthSwitch, before EthSwitch, banks had their own on-us networks, and they were trying to reinvent the wheel with closed loops. So yes, you've taken a real approach there. I think the other thing, we talk about efficiency, but if you think about financial stability, you want the payment systems to be open, competitive, innovative, efficient, reliable, and secure. That's a tough thing for certainly your jobs to be able to provide all of those things at the same time. And that's certainly a lot of what payment system operators think around the world. I'm going to turn it over to you, Governor Abbasi. Payment systems, we talked about, they tend to innovate when they're more open and competitive. We've talked a little bit about public infrastructure. And traditionally, public infrastructure tends to be delivered by public utilities. How do you think about, as these things start to merge maybe in terms of digital public infrastructure, how do you think about these roles coming together?
In Tunisia, I think we've built the payment infrastructure for more than 3 or 4 decades. Then I think the infrastructure is already there, but when I came to my position as a governor, I think I found, let's say, not a very good state of cooperation between the banking sector and the central bank, and of course the telecom companies, who I think they have their role in terms of the digitalization of the economy. And they have done a lot in terms of course, in Tunisia, the penetration rate in terms of internet is more than 130%. And of course, the access to the let's say, to the phone. We realized during the COVID crisis that let's say, the poor and the vulnerables, we wanted to give, the cash transfer were more than 100% having, their own phone, and not per family, but per person. And that it was also very, very important to understand. Then I think as a central bank, we are working on how we can enhance, let's say, our regulatory framework, but at the same time, how we can bring the banking sector, to play his role. And to be frank, they were, I think, more conservative than I was thinking. That's why I think we took the lead, and now we are restructuring what we call this Monétique Society, or what we call this firm, Société Monétique de Tunisie, is normally under the supervision of the central bank, but at the same also under the governance of the banking sector. Today, I think we are restructuring with our colleagues from the IFC, but at the same time, having the new governance. At the same time, we are doing the same with the payment infrastructure, with I think led by another firm is called Ciptel, and of course the central bank is involved, but at the same time is under the governance of the banking sector. But today we are working on changing the governance. At the same time, I think we launched in 2018-19 what we call this payment, the payment system through what we call this Société de Paiement, who is the payment firm. Now we have more than 5 or 6, who is very important because I think they will give the opportunity for, let's say the vulnerables and the not even the middle class, because they could access to the banking sector, but there's a lot of people, more than 60% today, that are not involved in the banking operations. They can even have, let's say, banking account, but it's only for one time during the month, just to bring the cash, and after it's cash operations. That's why today operations are very important for us. Establishment of payment is very crucial. Now we have 5 to 6, and we have some fintech involved also on the establishment of payment. And I think since 3 years we were working on that, and today we have I think the infrastructure, because also we restructure our infrastructure, our TGS, etc. I think it was now. I think we have the instant payment and in dinar, but also we are working even on with FX. But at the same time, what is very important for us is also to work on the culture, because the culture is not yet there, because the culture is cash. And today, people, they want cash. How you can, let's say, attract the people where they don't have anything to do with the government, to bring them through, of course, the payment, knowing very well, but after payment, they could have also, I think, something to do with the taxes. That also is part of informal and formal. It's very important, and digital payment and the culture and of course how we can help and support these people to understand that that's also is part of if they can be part of it, they can also gain from it.
That's excellent, thank you. You, Governor Abbasi, you brought up a bunch of points there, certainly. The last things you were talking about were around financial inclusion, cash displacement, and I think it's a nice way to frame this. The fact that people coming out of the gray economy tend to worry about paying taxes. Does anyone have any perspectives on policies or how you're tackling either getting cash out of the system, financial inclusion, financial education? Yes, Governor Mahmoud.
So I think it's a very important point. I think I read somewhere, this concept of the cash paradox. There's a digital acceleration of payments, but still people rely on cash. So it's not that, digital payment is replacing cash. In fact, they go hand in hand. They call it cash paradox. I thought that was a very interesting phrase. I mean, partly because people use cash as a store of value. So I think that will continue. And I think it will also continue, particularly in some markets, in some economies. I mean, my own country, Ethiopia, is a predominantly agricultural country. So despite the dramatic improvement that we're making in terms of digital payment, I think because the rural nature of the country, it's not like Tunisia, it's a big country, 75% of the population lives not in the urban areas, but in rural areas. And exactly because of that, people depend on cash. People like their cash. So that is what's happening. But from our perspective, the National Bank wants to try to reverse that, not only to make payment system more efficient, but also it is useful from monetary policy perspective. So if as a central bank, like any other central bank, the goal of the central bank is to maintain price stability, is to ensure financial stability. I think for those points and for those purposes, it's very, very important that cash is not outside the banking system. Cash should be in the banking system because whatever policy measures that you make in terms of monetary policy will be effective. So I think that's what we're currently trying to do. We're doing our best, but it's very, very difficult thing to handle, despite the significant financial literacy campaign that we are running.
Thank you. Andreas, I think you wanted to intervene as well.
Yes, thank you. Building on what the governors have said, I would like to inform you about my very strong view that it should be absolutely the consumer to decide whether he or she wants to use cash, whether he or she wants to go via electronic means of whichever offer, whether it's a public or a private offer, whether they want to go, once they exist through digital currencies. This is really up to the consumer. And, these should be complementary systems, not one overtaking the other. We have enough problems in the financial sector. We need to create a problem by crowding people out, let's say people of a certain age, just to bring one argument, using cash and making, as a state, making a rule how people should use a payment system. This should be use cases, users should decide, and they should be the master of the payment traffic, so to say.
Thank you, Andreas. So we talked about that. I think the chicken and egg folks were talking about getting cash out of the system. Frankly, we've seen that. Practitioners on the ground, we found it's hard to get small merchants to accept electronic payments when they have to pay their suppliers, for example, in cash. So I think you have to systemically solve these. And of course, Andreas, you're absolutely right. Ultimately, the consumer should choose how to pay. We can all encourage, certainly, forms of payment as well. Andreas, since you had the last question, we cannot have a panel on payments without talking about digital currencies. I think it was last week the British House of Lords published a paper saying that digital currencies were a solution looking for a problem. There's a lot of people who take the other side of that as well. What's your perspective, and certainly what are you hearing through your interactions around the world?
Different countries are in different positions. So you cannot compare country by country. If you have 60% of the reserve currencies of this world being the United States of America, you're in a very different position than if should you be, let's say, in economy which has 5 to 6% of the global of the global economic activity, maybe even 1% only of global reserves, currency reserves, and you are in a very different need of advocating your currency. So every country is in a different stage and in a different position. But in principle, we are seeing a shift globally away from cash towards digital solutions, first. Second, at the same time, we have private providers of digital payment systems. It's not that there wouldn't be private providers. Some of them are even central banks, and some of them are public authorities, and others are private providers. Third, we do have a situation that the private providers are increasingly getting into credibility issues. Yeah, some of them at least. And why are so many private citizens using the target systems of the ECB, while they could, of course, use banks transferring money and doing payments. There is a little bit of a challenge to, it's much easier to go through public authorities than using, private providers of that. So that's not strange. That's new. Now, in all of this, in a shift in the usage in payments, central banks were faced with Libra, Libra being interested in offering their own so-called currency. In that situation, central banks, I think, are obliged even to think through, how do I offer my currency not only in a fiat way, but also in a digital way? What are the pluses? What are the minuses? What are the risks? What are the opportunities? And you need to think that through to have a plan B, should private providers not perform their services in a correct way, which I don't see as right now, but a plan B is an important thing. You have to think through the sovereignty of your currency. How do you defend the sovereignty of your currency if you only, so to say, offer a fiat but not a digital version of your currency? How about stable coins where your currency may be packed in? And what do you do about that? So the questions to think through in a world where the usage of payments have changed, anyhow, and the usage of cash has changed, is a very natural thing to do. Does this come with risks? Of course. There is, first of all, and most importantly, the risk of crowding out private providers of payments, which has to be considered. Secondly, the banking systems need to be thought through. What do they have? If deposits no longer are with private banks and the transmission of monetary policy is changed, you have to think that through very, very carefully. Third, at the same time, do you want to have so-called currencies which have the image of a currency and where public authorities may have to stand behind them, needless that they have nothing to do with them at some point, and settlement systems getting challenged? What do you do about the safety of the financial system? So I think it's even obligatory for central banks to think that through, also given that the colleagues from the People Bank of China, of course, are making a big effort promoting it. The Bank for International Settlements has not a coordinating role, but it can give advice, can give all sorts of help, and can build a forum of discussion so that the governors and the payment experts of the central banks can talk to each other and share mistakes, threats, and advances. But it's almost, for me, impossible to say that they shouldn't look at it. What is important to me is a balance, an equilibrium. We don't know exactly yet where this equilibrium will be, but you need to try to find and make the effort to find an equilibrium of the interests of the private sector and the potential issuers of central bank digital currencies. If the issuers of central bank digital currencies, throw the banks underneath a bus, it's not going to help anybody. So this equilibrium, this balance, this is something which needs to be looked for. Last but not least, and I'm sitting here with 3 governors of central banks, and I think if they don't do it publicly, they will nod inside. Central banks are sometimes not the best in communication. They do good things and very smart things, but I see it with the European Central Bank, which is maybe the most advanced of the big 4 central banks, being the Fed, the ECB, the Bank of England, and the Bank of Japan. But in terms of communication, how do I communicate the need for a central bank digital currency? Maybe my friends and colleagues could have done a little better. And this is not at the forte of a central bank to go out and advocate. But you need to do this. If you think about issuing a central bank digital currency, you need to make very clear What are the advantages? What are the risks? Why am I doing this? When will I introduce this? What will happen to the banking sector? What will happen to the private providers of this? And if you don't do this, especially in a polarized world with a lot of extreme political views these days, you get into problems. You know, we have a situation that a candidate for the presidency of the United States of America, the Florida governor, has put central bank digital currencies into a speech, you know, running for president. If you would have told me that 5 years ago, I would have said, I don't think you know what you're talking about. Now it's happening. It is becoming a political issue. There's also the question, who decides on the central bank digital currency? Now, this is something, I'm a very big advocate coming from the German central bank of the independence of central banks, but this is not a decision a central bank can make by itself. You know, this is a very fundamental decision, which is not only a technical question, it's also a political question, and I'll stop here, we could go on, and I'll get very emotional about it, but it needs to be explained, and it needs to be carried by more than only, let's say, central bankers.
Thank you, Andreas. That was excellent. Does anyone want to chime in? Governor Abbasi.
I don't want to challenge. I want to add, you know, something personal. When I took my position as a governor, it was in 2018, and we've had our first meeting with the Bank of International Settlement, and we were talking about CBDC, etc. I think it was clear for me that it was not very important. That's my understanding, you know. After the discussion, etc., I said, no, it's not very important. Even though in my country, there's a lot of young people from these fintech, etc., telling me, oh, there's these crypto, digital currency, you need to do something, you need to better understand, you know, even inside the central bank. After 1 year, I think I see some improvement. And today there's, I think, a very important discussion inside these, let's say, this Bank of International Settlement. I'm not talking about the other ECB and others, etc. But today, even in my central bank, I think through my, what we call the regulatory sandbox, we need also to explain to our colleagues from the central bank, you know, I think the state of the art in terms of CBDC, crypto, etc. They have to understand, because at the end of the day, they will talk to the young guys coming from the fintech and try perhaps to propose some innovation who could really help and support, you know, the change. Then we need. That's what we have done in the Central Bank of Tunisia. We created the regulatory sandbox for I think 3 or 4 years ago. And we have done with the Banque de France, I think the first POC in terms of CBDC, cross-border, and retail, CBDC, retail banking. And it was a very important task that I think explained to our people inside the bank, but also the fintech, that we were able to do it through this, let's say, to formalize, you know, not only to discuss, but to formalize our cooperation with these fintechs. It was the French Tunisian fintech, very smart people there. And we are also working on the eKYC. That's why even with the digital payment, it's used. And today, it was, I think, used by a lot of banks. And it was a very successful story for the people that were part of the first regulatory sandbox. Then it's a process of learning by doing. But at the same time, we need also, as you said, I think to put it not only inside the central bank to communicate on CBDC, but I think it's a political decision at the end of the day. You want to do it, you don't want to do it, etc. It's part of, let's say, the civil society to talk also about it, because that is part of their, you know, we need to change perhaps their habits, their behavior, etc. That is part of normally what also we should do. But we need to better understand. We are the technical people. We need also to be sure that we will propose the right solutions.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to jump in? No? Okay. So we talked about digital currencies. I think one of the other big phenomena we're seeing around the world is instant payments, real-time payment systems. I'm going to turn to you, Governor Madrigal Lopez. We've seen a lot of scaling pretty quickly in some markets in Latin America. Everyone knows about Brazil and Pix, and I think it meets a lot of the met end user needs started to get ubiquity. In Costa Rica, you have SinPay. Can you talk a little bit about why you launched it and the experience so far?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, I think it's necessary to give a little bit of context about Costa Rica. It's a small open economy, 5.2 million people, so it's a small country in many senses. When we started with this payment system 25 years ago, the objective was to use for high value transactions. So at the beginning it was relatively easy for the central bank to do this system, the transfer for high value transactions. But right now still maybe like 27% of the transactions of the economy are made by cash, not by transfers. And the cost of use cash in Costa Rica is about 1 point of the GDP. So there is this motivation to reduce the cost of transactions. And now we want to move to retail transactions, electronic, digital retail transactions. So it has been kind of hard. So what is the objective that we have? I heard you when you said that there is a solution looking for a problem. Well, in Costa Rica, it's a matter of financial inclusion, maybe not. Around 84% of the population of 15 years and more, older than that, they have a telephone. If they have a telephone, they have a way to make payments. So this is not a matter of financial inclusion, but it's a matter of the cost of not doing transactions. So the next project that we are in the middle of that is to form the habit to pay with in another way that is not with cash. It can be with a bank account, with a credit, with a means of payment of a bank, could be a card or another device. So what we are doing is a big project on the public transportation. So the people can do these micro payments in buses with the bank card. So not like in other cities that they have a different system for the payment of transportation. No, we want the same, they use the card. And there is some studies that after I don't know how many times or days that using the cards for make payments, you have a habit. You have this habit, so you will start making another payments with electronic payments with the card. So this is the strategy that we are following right now. So we start with the high value payments. Now are with the retail payments that are huge in quantity, but not so much in value as part of the challenge. And the purpose is to reduce the cost of making transactions. So we didn't know. We started this about 25 years ago, and we heard about these Pix in Brazil. But we have the cases in other Latin American countries, people in central banks, to go to Costa Rica to study, and they discovered that they say that this is really pretty good. I don't know if it's pretty good, is what other people say. And it's pretty good doing high value transactions, now retail payments. It's fast, it's quick, it's cheap, but it's still a big challenge that we have. We have not solved the problem of how to do cross-border transactions. Maybe this will be the next step to solve that, because there are issues with the money laundering, know your customers, and how legitimate is the transaction. So it's the next step for us. I can go on and on, but I will stop here. I am be more than willing to answer questions.
Yeah, I wanted to just ask you a quick follow-on question, Governor. There are lots of central banks who are thinking about instant payments, the modernization of their payment systems. Are there any things, any lessons you learned along the way that if someone were ready to launch an instant payment systems, you would suggest they do
Yeah.
or not do?
No. There are a few ones. One is to keep the open mind, allow the private sector to participate, the innovation from the private sector, to welcome the participation of the so-called fintech. Actually, we have a kind of controversy in Costa Rica between the regulator and the central bank, because the regulator doesn't want to allow some payments providers, fintech basically, because they are afraid that they will compete with traditional banking. The central bank is more leaning to allow them under certain rules. Okay. And the other lesson that we have is to have some autonomy in the service provider. We know some experience in Europe, in Latin America, and when you want to make a little change in your system, it's so expensive because you are a hostage of your technology services provider. So there is something to work on that. In the case of Costa Rica, the core of the system is built in-house. Maybe it's not according with the common practices, but has been very successful. And we know that other countries, they are looking for that because, as I said before, I know one case in Europe and a couple of cases in Latin America that when they want to make a little change, it's so expensive to do that because they depend on a unique provider of these services. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. Does anyone have any comments they want to add to instant payments? No? Okay. Let's, did you have something? Okay. Before we turn it over to questions from the audience, I thought we would do kind of a bit of a quick lightning round on some topics. We can call it overrated, underrated, some buzzwords that are going around. So first one, tokenized bank deposits.
I'll
Please,
start because I'm the outsider now, so I can more easily start. The tokenization as a principle is the absolute future, and there is no doubt in my mind that tokenization will play a major role going forward. Having said that, whether bank deposits need to be tokenized, I'm not so sure about, but that we will have tokenization effects, that we will have very, very efficient tokenization procedures. It's absolutely clear to me. But there are other financial instruments which are more logically to be tokenized.
And anyone else like to offer an opinion? Governor Madrigal Lopez.
I just want to talk about a little bit something different. When you are talking about what is the role of the central bank with the digital currency, try to avoid this competition between central banks and commercial banks. But there is a case in which you can find a very good case of use for deposits in the central bank. Are you familiar with the term flight to quality? It's very common in Latin America. When there is a bank that is having problems, people take the deposits from that bank, usually will go to another country. The Argentinians go to Uruguay, the Costa Ricans will go to Miami, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. This is called flight to quality. It's going to a place that they think is more secure. Well, it wasn't the case in a Latin American country the private bank were having problems. So the people start taking the money out of the bank, and they put the money initially in a state-owned bank. But the central bank opened a facility to get deposits, and the people in big numbers put the money in the central bank. So this is a contingency case. When it is a run of deposits, the central bank can offer this facility. It was in the middle of, at the beginning of this century, but it's worthwhile to study that case, because it's a case in which the central bank offering this facility for the people to have deposits there is a contingency in case of the run of the bank account. Okay.
Thank you. Let me just turn to a few more. Governor Abbasi, you mentioned regulatory sandbox. So, first of all, how many of you do you have regulatory sandboxes, and what are your thoughts on them?
You want me to talk?
But anyone.
I think it was for me mandatory to do it, because I think when you have, we have one of the, I think in the region, I think we have one of the most vibrant, I think, startup and ecosystem in the region, to be frank. I discovered that when I was working for the World Bank, but I think when you are inside, of course, the mobility could permit it. What is important by mobility is today we can feel that there's a lot of very interesting, I think, scientists, etc., working, in a lot of places from our diaspora. They are back after 10 or 15 years, and back to Tunis because they are feeling that there's a lot of very good engineers, and they're with the high comparative advantages in the field of, let's say, blockchain, etc., etc. And the fact that today we have some important startup who became important. One is InstaDeep with artificial intelligence, and you have others coming. Then they can show that, these guys, after 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they were working with their computer with an investment of 5,000 dinars, less than $1,500. Being able, to have $600 million. That's also part of the dream. But at the same time, they are working in Tunisia, and they're working with a lot of young guys, young engineers, etc. The ecosystem is very important, and you need also to not only to say, as a central bank, we are here, but you need also to have your I think colleagues from the banking supervision, the financial stability, and the payment system, understanding what the others could do for them, and that is part of what normally we should do, and we have done it. And I think there's some success story today. When I was talking about the eKYC, it was a young guy from Harvard, computer science. He decided to come back to Tunis and to work with the Tunisian. And now the eKYC is, I think, very well used by a lot of regional banks. I'm talking about, for example, the Tijari Bank. And it's part of his eKYC system. And that is part of normally what we should do. On the other side, we need also to be close to the university, to the university and what we call the School of Engineers in information technology, etc. Because I need also to understand what kind of subjects we should put on the table, and doing the hackathons, etc. is part of normally we are doing also with the central bank. We have done in 2018 the first hackathon inside the central bank on the blockchain, Africa blockchain, and it was successful. And I discovered a lot of young guys from all over the region in Tunisia, but outside Tunisia, working on that. I understand that's a change. Then you need to be ready, to tackle it.
That's excellent. Thank you. Governor Mama.
No, I think I would second that as well. I think the payment system in general is fast evolving. So you see new payment systems, new players every day. And I truly believe the role of regulator should also be to foster innovation. And one effective way of doing that would be through regulatory sandbox. And I think there is an important role to be played by central banks in that regard. Just to comment also on on other innovations, I think it would be a mistake to dismiss this innovation as solutions looking for a problem. You never know. So I think it is important to stay engaged, and I think to stay open. And I would also think that the central bank should take artificial intelligence quite seriously. What would be the impact of that on, let's say, credit scoring? What would be the impact of that on financial innovation, payment system? These are important issues. And I think dismissing it from the get-go, I believe is not the appropriate way to go about it.
That certainly makes a lot of sense. I think most of us could add a long list of other benefits and concerns around artificial intelligence as well. I know we're drawing to, I think it's about 10 minutes left. Let me open it up for questions from the audience. Do we have microphones we can pass around? Oh, you have one. Perfect. Please.
Working? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask this question. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation and for the discussion. My name is Mohamed Haddad. I'm a Tunisian consultant in public policies, and my question goes to Governor Abbassi. So my question, the first one is, you spoke about the project of the IFC regarding Tunisie Monétique. Why don't you allow competition instead of reforming this company that has been going on since 1989 and has been dysfunctional and failed a lot of times? As Tunisian consumers, I guess, we experienced that. The second question, if there is a political decision to stop servicing debt, disregarding the ability to pay or not, as the governor of the central bank, what would you do?
I think when you are talking about Société Monétique Tunisie, it's, you said that it's not functioning, or it was not under competition. I think our regulatory system in Tunisia was based, from the beginning on CIBTEL, SMT, banking sector, central bank, etc. When you decide, to change let's say what we call this rules of the game, first of all, you need also to understand what should be done and how for example, the Société Monétique de Tunisie is working. That's why we have done this full, let's say, assessment on this firm, and working on the new governance. That's why we are working with the IFC on that. I think today, opening or not opening, that's another decision. I think the first step is to understand if it's efficient, it's not efficient, if it's secure, if it's not secure, if there's risks, there's no risk. That is part of our work, and we have done it. Then that is part of our role as a central bank, and we decided to do it. I will tell you something also important. Then when I took my position, I give it to the bank to do, for example, the interoperability through the private sector. They did not do anything for years, for 2 years. And you know it, because you are Tunisian, and you are following, this. And I decided to bring back to the central bank and to do the interoperability and to do it internally in the central bank. And now it's working. The problem is we have the interoperability and it's working. And the problem is I have done this with a startup, with a very interesting fintech from Netherlands and Tunisia through an hackathon. Just to and they were very innovative, and they created this. I try to remember the name Flussi, and they have done it, and it was less than the time put on the what we call the terms of references, and it's a great and cooperation between us and Flussi. At the end of the day, today I think you can pay your bill, stakes on it, etc., through the let's say the smart, etc., Tunisia. I try to remember the name. But today, it's not functioning quite well. Why? Because I think it's very, very important to educate the people, and to I don't know if you are paying your bills with your phone or not. No, then you see, you are asking me questions and you are not doing it. That's part of the education. You need to do it, because I think it's better, it's less expensive. You can do it from here, and you are not doing it, and you're an expert on technology. How I can do it with the normal citizen in Tunisia? No, I'm joking. I don't want to answer.
Convenient, which is not already the case.
We are not in the US. We are not in the US, and to answer on PayPal, I want PayPal to come, but PayPal doesn't want to come to Tunisia for other reasons. That's another. That's why I said clearly the education, financial education is very important, and people like you should also, because you are part of the, let's say, this environment. You should also help and support and use the advantages we are giving right now. I think it took us a lot of time, a lot of effort as a central bank to do it, and it took me 3 years to do it. And now I think it's important to pay your bill through your phone and using our the tools we put for you to be used. Thank you. I don't have there's no second question. We are talking about digital payment. We are not talking about another. I don't answer other questions.
Hello. Yes. Hi. Hi, I'm Robert Blom. I'm a consultant. To what extent is the common carrier concept or experience, concept or experience from the utilities world? So we're talking about a kind of utility, as in the electric utilities, gas utilities, telecom, ISPs, internet service providers. So to what extent is that concept or experience useful or applicable here in this question of digital payments with central bank digital currency? Thank you.
Just say one sentence or two sentences. To ask this question when there is not even a decision to issue the central bank digital currency is okay for you to ask, but very difficult to get an answer. So, we're in that there's going to be a 2-year consultancy period should it be decided, and nobody in his right mind or her right mind would answer that question right now. So that's why it is a little bit premature. Maybe next year when Mark does another conference like this, or 2 years from now, we are going to be in a better stage to answer this.
Hi there. Thank you very much to all the panelists. My name is Alexander Feeney, and I'm focused on central bank digital currency deployment support for central banks. There was a mention earlier about PayPal, who obviously recently launched a stablecoin. Maybe a question for the governors on the panel. What is your view on stablecoins that are issued by your local commercial banks as a bridge to CBDC while we wait for the right regulatory frameworks and whatnot to be put into place?
I'm the bold one here. I'll start from a different point. I believe, but probably I'm the only one in this room, but I believe, should we have central bank digital currencies, who in the world would want to use a stablecoin? If I can choose between a perfectly safe central bank issued currency or buy a stablecoin where I do take the risk of the issuer of that stablecoin, with my little wealth, would always go for the central bank digital currencies. You asked the question of a bridge. That is an individual answer, I think, everybody, but I don't think that central banks should be concentrated what shall be the bridge until then, but should concentrate on how do we build a good central bank digital currency. And that's why I'm shying away from this, from answering your question. But in the end game, I would always prefer a central bank digital currency over a stable coin.
I was reluctant to answer your question because we have that question for us at the central bank. And I go back to another fundamental question. What we want to achieve, what for? What is the purpose of that? So when you go deep on that, you have a good payment system that is efficient, that enables financial inclusion, is cheap, is convenient. What is the need of digital currency? So in our case, I remember we're a small open economy. Maybe we are not an example for anybody, but it's how we think. We said, well, maybe we have to do is to make better the traditional payment system and not to go to the digital currency, because we have the objectives we are pursuing, we are able to get them with our payment system. So why to go to this adventure? Why to go to this adventure of digital currency? What for? Is the particular case of Costa Rica, I'm not saying that is an example for other countries, but when we try to answer your question, we don't see at the margin any advantage to having this digital currency. Thank you.
Add and say that it's very important to note that different countries are at different stage on this particular issue, right? So I mean, in some areas on the issue of digital currency, in some countries, particularly African countries, there's kind of preliminary thinking around the subject, right? There's a lot of thinking, a lot of effort to understand it, let alone make a decision on what to do. So I think context matter, and also the level of development of the financial sector do matter. So I think it's important to differentiate and to really understand what the universe of digital currency is throughout the world. Just want to point out that.
Thank you to the Policy Center for such a qualitative panel. It's very much appreciated, I think, by everyone. I have more of a monetary policy question in general, looking at digitalization. With the rise of the SDGs and all the commitment of the NDCs that has been done looking at sustainable development, do you think the digitalization of bank assets, of the financial sector in general, and everything that it allowed in terms of traceability and steering power, do you think it will change the dogma of neutrality towards sustainable development, or does central bank need to keep a step back from any global problem and just make the market run?
I'll try to be brave and try to address it. I think as important as the issue is, the whole idea of SDG, I believe central banks should be focused on their core mandates. I think it would be a very, very difficult path to take if central banks were to engage in an area that's not their core mandate. But in fact, if central banks are successful in their core mandate, which in my view is price stability, financial sector stability, that is an important precondition for the SDG goals to be fulfilled. There is some role to be played by other government departments, and those departments should play that role. I think if central banks are good at what they do, then it will eventually contribute. I will also point out that the whole digital acceleration has been extremely, extremely helpful in meeting those objectives. We see it in our case, for example, in terms of financial inclusion, in terms of financial deepening, safety, in terms of making government service more reachable and more efficient, there is a significant role that technology is playing. So in our thinking, we should certainly put technology and what technology can deliver at the center of everything that we do. That's what I would say.
Maybe I am going or something that you say. Central bank usually have originally one responsibility that was the stability of the currency, and after the crisis, maybe it's price stability and financial stability. And the central bank usually is the last resort lender. So as long as it's related with that functions, for me it's perfectly fine. But I will be aware to go into things that are not, as you said, at the core of the central bank, because the political economy can go in many ways. So we have to, in order to keep our autonomy and independence, we have to maintain focus in where is our main mandate: price stability and financial stability.
My microphone died, so that's clearly a sign that time is up. Let me quickly just try to summarize and then thank our panelists. So I think there was really good discussion and consensus around the role of the public sector and the role of the private sector, certainly in driving payments and what role they play. We also heard some really good examples around governments having a digital agenda and policies, and certainly the role that payments can play in supporting that. Around digital currency, I think we have more questions than answers. I think Andreas did a really nice job of talking about the depth of the question, and it's going to depend by country, technology, the role of the private sector, how monetary policy will be transmitted, the role of banks more broadly, and the question goes certainly beyond just currency, but has really societal and political dimensions. So that's certainly going to continue to play out. I want to, as Andreas said before, I think it's not been traditionally a big part of the job requirement or job description for a central bank governor to be incredibly communicative and open. But you all certainly buck the trend today. You've been incredibly generous and robust and incredibly communicative. So thank you all for participating in today's panel. A big round of applause for our panelists.
Ladies and gentlemen,